Hi, this is Sue for Parkies and Me, my journey with Parkinson's. Now, the other day I recorded a podcast and it was about telling our stories before they were lost. And I think in trying to capture everything that I wanted to capture, I went into the realms of rambling in places. And the podcast itself was really long and much longer than I usually would make. So my husband is my biggest support, but he's also my best critic. And my cousin is usually a good critic as well. They're two people that I can trust to tell me when things aren't how they should be. Now, she's been busy, so she hasn't come back to me, though she will, of course. And my husband pointed out to me that things were a bit sort of jumbled and out of sequence, that I talked too fast, that the sentences ran into each other, and a few other things. But the main thing was that the podcast itself was too long. So I took that on board and I actually agreed with him. When I reviewed it, when I listened to it again, it was a bit rambling and it was not my best work. And so I decided to redo it and re-edit and take out a bunch of stuff that I felt on reflection maybe didn't need to be there. The title of this particular podcast is Perfection is Overrated and Shouldisms. So I'll talk to the first bit first. So perfection is overrated is something that I've always said. If we strive for perfection, we often don't achieve that, and then we feel that we haven't done as well as we should. And that's a word, that last word, should, is a word that I really don't like, but we'll get to that later. So it has been said to me by various bosses that I'm a perfectionist. Far from it. I know that I will never reach the dizzy heights of perfection, and I don't aim to be perfect in things that I do either. I try my best, but I know that perfection is often out of reach, and it's something that I don't want to aspire to. It's a lofty goal that doesn't suit me, and it is in every aspect of my life. It's not that near enough is good enough necessarily, and I don't try hard, but I know my limitations. Now, my cousin, who I talk about a lot, when she does a project, I think she's a perfectionist. And when she does projects, they're beautiful, they're perfect. She can make quilts that are just so complicated. She can do so many things, and they come out to me perfect. But I've had some experience doing mosaics, and I tried once to do a mosaic that was sort of straight lines and rigid, and it just did not work out. It wasn't me, and I couldn't get it right, and I got frustrated, and I thought I would have been able to do better. But I know that I cannot be constrained by having to measure things and all that sort of thing when I'm doing something like a mosaic. I have made some beautiful things with mosaics. I copied one of my mum's paintings in mosaic, and I've done a couple of other things as well. And I was able to achieve what I wanted to achieve without having to do straight lines, without having to do things tightly governed by the constraints of measurements. And they come out well. So I know that I can do random sort of, seemingly random. I can do seemingly random mosaics, but I will not try to do things that are too rigid and too measured, because that just doesn't work for me. So yeah, I don't know where this perfectionist label came from, particularly from one of my bosses. And when she called me a perfectionist, I don't know how she could say that. I think I have ways of doing things. When I was working, I was organised and I knew what I was doing most days, but the work that I did didn't always allow for that to be as organised as one might like. But I think if you aim for perfection, you may be at risk of disappointing yourself. Now, as I said before, I did this podcast about telling our stories. It was too long, and so I decided to edit it down. And when I edited it down and listened back to it, rather than improving the product that I was trying to improve, that podcast, to me it was worse. There was still not enough gaps in between the sentences, and you could tell that it had been edited and the edits didn't come out as well as I would have hoped. And so while I had shortened it so it wasn't as long, nowhere near as long as it had been, it was not very polished at all. And again, I'm an amateur, I'm doing my best. I just want to talk about my journey with Parkinson's and me as a person and the things that influence me. But because I felt that I hadn't done a good enough job of the previous effort about telling our stories, I redid it, and in redoing it, I put more pressure on myself to get it more perfect, more polished, and in the end I still had a product that I wasn't happy with. So I think perhaps sometimes if I do these podcasts and they get too long or the editing's not how I would like it to be, I just will either leave it as being long and it's not my best work, or I'll just delete it. I'll just delete it from my podcast, because I do not need that pressure. Now, the second half of this podcast, I'd like to talk about should and shouldisms. For a long time now, I have hated is a bit of a strong word, but I have not liked the use of the word should and people's using shouldisms. You know, they should do better, they should try harder, I should be nicer to people. Those sort of expressions to me are laden with other people's expectations of what we should or shouldn't do. And I think to me that is not an easy fit, because we're all individuals, we can all make our own decisions, and I do not need the weight of somebody else's expectations upon me. And I found myself saying to my husband about the podcast that I wasn't very happy with, I should have done better, or words to that effect. I felt that I'd let myself down in doing a less than perfect. And again, I say I don't aim for perfection, but perhaps on this occasion I had. And it left me feeling sad and that I hadn't done a good job and beating myself up because I had done too long a podcast that was disjointed, and then I did a shorter podcast that I'd trimmed down from the original that was disjointed and not very well edited, and I felt sad and bad that I hadn't done a better job. I think often we are our own worst critic. You know, others may have heard that podcast and enjoyed the length of it, liked the stories that were attached, but when I listened to it back, to me it felt a bit rambling and disjointed, like my husband had sort of indicated. So I'm going to try and cut myself some slack here. Perfection is overrated, so I will not be aiming for perfection. I will try and do my best, but never aim for perfection. For if reaching for perfection, we will often be disappointed and feel that we have let ourselves down. But if I can do the best job that I can do at that particular point in time, then I will be happy. And as for that last part, the shoulds and shouldisms, I try really hard not to use those words or that word. I would find other ways to express what I want to express. So instead of saying I should do something or I should do better, I will say I will try from here to cut myself some slack, to get back to enjoying doing these podcasts without the pressure. And the pressure comes from me more than anybody else. And I want to get back to enjoying these podcasts because they are important to me. So from here, I will try to continue doing my best and hope that my best is well received. This has been Sue for Parkies and Me, my journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be strong, be brave, be you.